Hi everyone, thanks for joining. This is the final event in the series. We can't believe it's round to the final event already. I'm Kate from Beam and we're a founding member of the National Arts and Place Consortium organising these events. So this event is being streamed live, so please bear with us for any technical issues. Please use the chat section on YouTube and we'll try and pick some of these up towards the end of the conversation. So now I'm delighted to welcome artist Ibrahim Mahama. Hello. Hi,
Hello.
Ibrahim. And also Selom Kudjie, the Artistic Director of the Savannah Centre for Contemporary Art in Tamale. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to hand over to you. And if you need me, I will be here in the background. Okay. So
Okay.
over to you.
All right.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to our conversation. And thanks, Kate, for the invitation. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. So I'm Selom Kudjie, the Artistic Director of SCCA. SCCA stands for Savannah Center for Contemporary Art, and it's sited in Tamale. And then SCCA Tamale is more of an artist-run space, and then it functions in so many ways. It's a project space, it's an exhibition center, it's a cultural repository, and then a research hub, and also an artist residency. So it's founded by Ibrahim Mahama, who is online, and to contribute to the development of contemporary art in Ghana. And then SCCA is also affiliated to Black Star Lines, Kumasi. And then SCCA works to produce and share knowledge through exhibitions, and then workshops and publications and many other allied activities. So sorry for the technical issues. Ibrahim.
Hello.
Ibrahim.
Yes, sorry. The internet is acting up. Yes. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about your project? Basically, in a way, part of the project. What I mean is that what you've been working on so far, SCCA, and any other activities that you are involved in.
Well, thank you very much, Selom, for this engagement and conversation. I know we have conversations all the time, but at least I think it's also necessary to share some of the conversations that we have with the general public or our audience. And thank you very much, Kate and Al, everyone who's made this very much possible. I think you've mentioned quite a lot already with regards to what SCCA is and what it stands for, what it means, and the other cultural institutions or individuals that we work with, like Black Star Alliance and then our colleagues from Kumasi. In my own practice over the years, of course, training coming from Kumasi, the idea has always been to expand artistic form beyond the state of objecthood into not just becoming a gift, but also into becoming almost like a phenomenon or some kind of a new notion that helps us to shift our general perception of art. So in as much as I have been in my early practice, I spent a lot of time collecting jute sacks. So I think I'll share the screen.
Okay.
Can you see the screen?
Oh, nope. I can.
Coming, I think, yes, I found it.
Okay.
Okay, so is it fully on the screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Is it full screen, or you can see all the other things around it?
I can see other things.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Yes, full screen. It's full screen.
It appears full screen.
Yeah, it does.
I'm coming. I think it does. Okay.
Yeah,
So my practice started using the idea of the body, like the condition of the body. So in the early stages, I think I was very interested in like material qualities and all that. So I started collecting these jute sacks that have all these interesting characteristics with regards to markings and all that. And the whole idea regarding collecting these specific materials was to trace the history behind these materials, but also to work with new forms of aesthetics. And by then, you would have to go into, let's say, the labor processes and also different production systems and all that. Some of these I thought were very interesting because they connected to our history with regards to the railways, and then even the history of production of trains, which were used as one of the strong forms of like exploitation within Africa and the rest of the world. Of course, I am not just interested in the jute sack as it is. I'm interested in the systems that it's connected to. So I started doing a lot of visits to the railway workshop in Sekondi, which you yourself, Patrick Okanta and Robin, did your research around, which you did your If You Love Me. Yeah, so those were some of the sites that I was interested in. The fact that the residues within these sites, whether directly or indirectly, could somehow inform the work or the form of work that I was going to produce, and how the form was going to be somehow disseminated. So in some of the images, you'll find that I use bridges and all that. So I'm also interested in the direct consequences that architecture also has, both in its history and also in its physical form within the presence. These are some spaces like church spaces which I worked in. And if you look at the architecture closely, you realize that with the SCCA design and, let's say, red clay, they have similar architectures with regards to how the space is designed. So I was thinking about all these spaces in relation to how that could inform physical spaces that artists can use. So those were some of the things that influenced the SCCA. You also have the silos around the country, which were built by Kwame Nkrumah in the early 60s. So this particular one, we're looking at the octagonal structures, which is the top of the silo, which I took drone. And then the other smaller images by the two by the side are when you look through the hole, which the grains or the beans would have come from. So there are these pockets of spaces trapped within buildings. And in as much as I'm interested in, let's say, the language of the material in itself and what it does, I'm also interested in like architecture itself and the meaning of it. Of course, the jute sack I used in many different projects. Like this one was in Tel Aviv. This one was covering one of the physical silos in Tamale, looking at the relationship between spaces like, let's say, the Alaju Gata in Accra, covering it where bacterial life and all these things are interacting with the work, versus, let's say, the Kunsthal Charlottenburg, which is the museum in Denmark. So the idea that art can go back and forth, the KNUST library, the exchanger, which we did in Kumasi, which Selom, yourself, you were part of the guys who coordinated the program, the exhibition.
Yeah.
And the Great Hall project, which we did at the library, at the university almost 2 years ago. I'm going through some other images. Yeah, so this is a piece called the Library of Caricature Seidu, which I produced in Chicago last year. The Parliament of Ghosts, which was this major work that I did as part of the Manchester International Festival, which I'll come down to now. Where is this? Okay. Yeah, so the Parliament of Ghosts, which was in Manchester, I decided that I was going to replicate it at Red Clay as part of the studio, which could also be a space that SCCA, since it's a space for modern and contemporary art exhibitions, research, and all that, we could actually have a parliament that will be dedicated to conversations and all that. So that was what actually influenced that decision. So instead of building this parliament, which would have been a work that would be in Manchester or will end up being in a museum somewhere in the world, I thought it was somehow important to build the work physically in Tamale. So we started working on it last year. I think sometime around September, October, when we went with Lawyer Saibu to the place again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the images with the excavator is actually looking at the excavation of the land. And then this image on the other side is I took that 2 days ago. So from building, so I'm also very much interested in what it means to actually construct a space from the ground up, and what it means also politically in terms of what the form of contemporary art can be within our time, our lifetime, and our century. I think one of the questions that keep coming up is the issue of the COVID-19 and how a lot of artists tend to respond to it. But I think that one of the very strong things that we have from Kumasi, it's that we use pedagogy very much as a way of somehow creating new shifts in the way that we look at the form that art can take within this century and beyond. So I think it's more or less examining the potentials of new realities beyond our existing one. And I think that in the work that we've been doing, in working on SCCA, working on all those workshops with the school kids, or building the parliament itself and looking at, let's say, children for like Latif and then Shamo and all those other kids that and Sakite from SCCA has been working with them on the drone workshops. I think it unleashes some kind of a new radical potential in the way that we disseminate like artistic forms, because red clay is in a rural area village just a bit outside of the city center of Tamale. Usually one would expect that these kinds of centers or resources would be like in the very centers of cities and all that. But I think that just as the way we use like materials like the jute sacks, which are almost at the periphery, which is going bad, we bring it back to life and somehow resurrect it in a different form. I think it's very, very important for us to look at artistic production within that sense. So like transporting the airplanes, which are quite from Accra back to Tamale, and like having children, for instance, having access to the interiors and all that. I think that there is something that it does physically. So now art doesn't just become an object. Of course, sometimes an artist can work in between, maybe producing a work that ends up in like museums around the world or galleries. But I think it's also important that the artist thinks very much about the local and what promises there are when we somehow turn it around or reverse the process or make these shifts, or even look at both in the same plane. So yeah, so I'll end that there. Through the conversations, a lot of things will arise, and then we can deal with it.
Okay. I'd like to ask one question. You are noted for using the jute stack and other objects in your project. So I think you've slightly touched on that, but I would like you to elaborate more on the fact that you've shifted from the use of objects into building an institution. So how why that shift?
Oh, well, I don't necessarily think it's a shift. I think it had always been there, because as artists, development, because we're constantly trying to find new ways in which we can engage the public or the world at large in the work that we produce. And I think by learning our art history, we've realized what the potentials of art has always been across the centuries, but at the same time, what the limitations of art has been. Because if you produce a painting or a sculpture, it has its potentials and it has its limitations. But if you construct, for instance, if you construct a space that, or if you go back in time, like the silos that we are working with at the moment, and somehow resurrect an old space. It has the ability to influence a generation of artists, even with regards to the way they think about form, in terms of how they produce their artworks, their choice of materials and all that. And in my work, like choosing the jute sacks was very essential because of what potentials lied within it. Because a jute sacks, unlike a solid object, can take the form of anything. So if it's an architectural like structure, it can somehow wrap it. It can be stretched like a paint, hanging on a wall. It can take the form of a floor, like we did with the was it Gal Must Go to Town? It covered the building. It was cornfields in Accra.
Okay.
Yeah, when we covered the floor.
Gal Must Go to Town, and then cornfields in Accra.
Yes.
You covered the building and then the floor.
Yes, and Oddly Disorderly.
Orderly Disorderly was basically a movie or a film about your works. That was
okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. So that was it. That the ability that the work can change, can take very different forms. So in a case that now I have been doing research into, let's say, different architectural units around the country, and suddenly I realized the reason why I was attracted to those was because I thought they had really interesting potential for work, for art. That was what actually informed me or inspired me to make my work on such a large scale. So I thought that it would be quite interesting to create spaces like that could also in turn help older artists, for us to resurrect their practices and also influence a new generation of artists with regards to how they think about the form that art can take.
Interesting. I remember that during our final year projects, exhibitions, and going through the undergraduate program, one thing I've noticed is that we lacked in institutions, and then the approach or the direction of teaching has to do with the fact that you are your own curator, you're your own exhibition maker, you source for space, everything. Yeah. So I'm wondering, what is how important is place to you, the idea of place for you as an artist, because you show in various places, and then you are building a space to showcase artists and to showcase artworks, and then also a place for research and so on. So I'm wondering, what is the meaning of place to you, or how is place important to you? The idea of place itself. When you move the object from it being when you consider the whole idea of the conceptual and also the social involved together in a specific place. So I'm wondering, how is that important to you? Is that clear enough?
No, it's very clear.
Yeah,
I think it's the idea of the place that we're talking about here also comes down to the idea of memory. Because memory is very important, and in all these objects that we deal with, it's also to go back into a certain time. It's almost like time travel. The important thing to note is that SCCA and red clay are both shaped and influenced by drawings that were produced when the railway sheds were built around Ghana. So drawings that were made between 1890 and then 1920. So a lot of this research that I did, which I collected some of the old drawings, influenced the shape and form which I wanted the institution to take. So in a way, there is a direct relationship or reference to back to that era and then the spaces that are there. Of course, we as artists, we've inherited quite a lot within our history, and we are dealing with a certain level of, let's say, potentials and failures, and we use those, like the crisis, whatever crisis those have produced across the ages, as a form of material to produce the work that we're making now, and also the attitudes that will be born out of it. So for me, when I consider place, I think it's quite big. mostly I just look at it as it's almost like a portal, like something that you can go through, like the silo that we are dealing with at the moment. Because when you consider it, even within the element of geography, when you look at the silo, for instance, in Tamale, and you go to Ho and look at the silo there, and you go to Accra or Takoradi or Tema or any other place where these silos are, it's almost as if you can go through one and appear in the other at the same time. So I think that normally when we are looking at spaces, we always look at them as they are. And I think that is also coming out from the modernist notion of looking at something, looking at an object or a structure within a specific given place in time. But I think that within our contemporary attitude, particularly with as you mentioned before, in Kumasi, when we were in undergrad, I remember some of the exhibitions were very impossible to make because you had to consider so many things with regards to the conceptual framework to the very core of, let's say, if you had to make changes to a given space to make life forms happen within it. Like Hartwell's work, where she uses the trotro, and they have to drive with, there were two females, one being the driver and one being the conductor, that somehow
hold on, what is trotro?
Bus, not a public transport. It's more like public transport, but operated by private individuals, but on a mass scale, where for people moving around the city. So that in itself alone somehow broke, because normally you don't find female conductors or female drivers. So that in itself, with the various relations that were created there, and as the car was moving across, not just stationary, it was moving across time. So all the different constellations that were happening in every different point was very different to the way that you would interpret the work. So I think that the idea of place becomes something which is very, very complicated. And in turn, as I said before, I find it almost like a portal, something that you can use as a way to look at the world in many different ways.
Okay, thank you. You've been mentioning the silo a lot. Can you tell us a bit about the silo and how it's connected to, how that place or a site, the silo is connected to, it's important to you, or how it's connected to SCCA, and then the TUTSAC, and in general?
Okay, I'm going to do a screen share.
Okay.
Okay. So so the silo, this is the base of the silo in Tamale. Recently, when I acquired it in the name of SCCA as an institution. So we have the chance to somehow almost go back in time. It's almost like a time travel, to go back in time and resurrect an old object or an old structure which had great potential. These silos were built in the 1960s, early 60s, when post-independent Ghana, and they were built to store food, grains, mostly cocoa, but you can store corn, cashew, or whatever within them. They were built at very different rates around the country. Some of them were nearly completed, some were not completed. They used to be called the Food Distribution Corporation. Of course, in the mid-60s, when Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown, all of these buildings were abandoned. Of course, in the 80s, there was a famine that hit Ghana. So sometimes I always connect these buildings to that period with regards to maybe what they could have done if the silos were active at the time, and if they are taking a very different shape. So one of this is the silo in Ho, and the other one is in Tamale. So the one without the top part of the silo is the one in Tamale, which we are dealing with at the moment, but it has like a base underneath it. And there are a lot of misconceptions around it because it was never finished in Tamale. a lot of people in Tamale used to call it the Kwame Nkrumah hole. In our language, is Nkrumah voile, and a voile literally means like a hole, a place of failure, a place of uncertainties, a place of like maybe misery, torture, or whatever. But it's also a place of potential because it's the basement is almost designed like a reservoir, and it collected quite a lot of water between the mid 60s and until dates when we had to draw the water out to access the basement. And most of Tamale used to access water from it in a time of water crisis and shortage before a lot of the pipelines were produced. So I think that I thought it was important to bring it into an institutional context because of the ideas that we are dealing with within SCCA and Red Clay, because we are trying to create programs that somehow birth these new potentials or resurrect failed revolutions or something like that. And the other important thing to note is that a lot of these acquisitions that I'm making is coming from the idea of the jute sacks, because when I produce work as an artist, which is sold to institutions around the world, is the same money that I've used in building SCCA, Red Clay, and then acquiring this. And it would have been literally impossible to acquire this building without SCCA, because they cannot really sell the building because it was a state building. They can't sell it to an individual, but an institution. But because of the work that we had done at SCCA, that was the reason why this building was sold to SCCA to begin with. So we could find new ways in which we could use the history that it comes with, and also the forms that exist within the building as a new point to maybe start a new program and work with new kinds of artists and realize new kinds of projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you get to acquire it? How was the process like?
It was actually through a series of proposals, because I had been doing some research on it as part of my PhD. And even in the exchanger, there are images of it in it where some of the silos are covered with a jute sack. And some of them I just took photographs of, which I labeled them as spaces of potential. At the time when What?
Hold on, I think you can show that image. It's up there.
Yes.
Somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you see it? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, this one. Yeah.
Yes. So spaces of potential, but I thought it was important to somehow go into it. So the Lands Commission, which is responsible actually for the sale, wanted a proposal based on like what I wanted to use the building for, because the building has been sitting there for the last 54 years untouched. And this is the first time in 54 years that actually you see the base of the silo, which is the image which I was showing. So it is actually very, 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 very important with regards to, and you see there are some parts where it's very dark. I don't know whether the cursor shows on the screen.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. So that is where the water levels were. So it was literally impossible to see what was underneath it. And because it was never completed, most people never really understood what the structure itself was. So this is the first time for anyone to even have access to the space to even map it out or see what the potential of the space can be or whatever. But I thought it was somehow an important risk to take. It's almost like a discovery, like almost like going into an archaeological site to look for objects or things like that. But what we actually discovered down there were different life forms, and we are trying to work with some animal experts to somehow save maybe the bats that are living there, or some special types of fishes or reptiles which have been living there for many, many years. But we had to negotiate based on all of this and the fact that we were going to preserve the building, and then use SCCA as an institution which has the track record of, let's say, producing exhibitions and cultural programs, to some, almost as a guarantee that the building will not be destroyed. If not, it would have been, because anyone can acquire this building and destroy it or turn it into a storage space or anything. But to understand the cultural significance of it and also the connections that it has, because it was built by former Yugoslavian architects, Polish architects, Russian architects during the time of the Cold War. So there's even a lot of history to unearth within the building itself. And I think that's what SCCA and Red Clay is trying to do, with the idea of not just releasing memories which are fading away, but I don't know, just realizing these new potentials that we keep coming back to.
Okay. Besides the Salo, is there any other place or any other sites or national buildings or assets that you think you like to engage with? As in, what I mean is that I know that you mentioned Cold War. After the Cold War, we were initiated into the structural adjustment and so on. So so many national assets began to be given out to be sold to private institutions or private owners. So based on that, certain national heritage or national or iconic buildings or things that have been certain common things to art were given now to private people or private owners. So I'm wondering, there's this idea of reclaiming these objects or these sites and then redefine it. I don't know, to its former glory or beyond that.
Beyond itself.
So beyond that. So and I know that you are also buying land with that same logic. Lands which were just sold out without any specific direction, if I may say so. So how will you speak to this whole idea of reclaiming land or structures in general?
Yeah, I think thank you very much. It's a really important question. And I think it's one of the things that art, particularly in this century, we keep talking about the idea of, a certain sense of progress, particularly when we are thinking about potentials and the potentials that art has within the century and beyond. But we somehow keep failing at it. And it's because there are some important questions which we fail to ask. Ghana in itself is almost like sometimes a country, sometimes we say it's like almost like a country with no memory, because we forget very easily with regards to how certain things were built or certain histories, and how we can go back in time and insert ourselves within those histories and shift or change things around. Of course, in my own practice, like the non-orientable and cancer, which is this major work which I produced a couple of years ago, which are in some institutions around the world, I had to go literally to one of the old factories which was built in Nkrumah's time in Tema, which was called the Gihok factory. It was a paint factory, the paint division, Ghana Industrial Holdings. Yeah, it has a long name, but when it was a paint factory. I think I was sharing an image before. Let me see. Yes, this is it, Gihok. So these are archival images that are coming from the factory from the 1960s when it was in operational, post-independence. And the image at the top, which is the color, is when it was privatized to a German company, Bridal Trust, in 1994. So when I needed to produce work, I needed a special type of space and also some residues to produce the work. And I used this space as a production site for the work. I remember it was Benjamin Okante, and then Francis Jiwonu, that my two very good friends and studio assistants, that really helped in making this work possible. And it was literally collecting the archives within these spaces and then using some of the residues within the space as a way of producing the language of the non-orientable in cancer. Because the non-orientable was almost looking at the idea of a portal, like using the objecthood as a way to access, let's say, this old factory, which is defunct now, which they have abandoned it to rot. It was sold to a Chinese firm. So the factory or the building doesn't exist anymore. It was destroyed. So I was asking myself a lot of these questions. As artists, what can we really do? What can we really do? That's why I started looking at the idea of reclaiming old spaces. Of course, the time when I was doing this project, I was already working on SCCA and red clay. But some of the buildings, like like one old cotton factory in Tamale, which was designed by one of the military leaders back in the 70s, Kenala Champong, which has been now sold to a Chinese group, I hear. So the question is, how do we take ownership of these spaces? How do we reclaim these spaces? Even if it was built for, let's say, a cotton, as a cotton factory, can we reclaim it by even going into the idea of cotton production? Can we redefine what the idea of, let's say, production is, or collective production is within our time? For instance, the smoke industry, maybe it's possible that we can reclaim this factory and redefine what the material itself is, because if the cotton, even the yarns that they use in spinning or weaving the cotton, the smokes are imported from China. So what if we produce the cotton ourselves as it was done before, a century and before ago? And then through that, maybe we can start to produce new types of things. We can produce carpets, upholsteries, we can produce canvases, we can produce maybe certain objects which are impossible to even think about now or before. So I think the architecture has a very, very, very important role to play. And the reason why we have to reclaim this is because it also brings back a certain sense of hope that those spaces had maybe when they were built at a time. Of course, some of them were built at a time maybe when there was a certain limitation of freedom. But beyond that, I think that once the building lives across ages, it comes to accumulate new forms of life and new forms of ghost at the same time. And we have to try as much as possible to look at the potentials that those ghosts have.
Interesting. Okay. So the idea of residue that you mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll be wondering, do you think there can be a space without residue or something like that?
Well, I think that sometimes it depends on for me, sometimes I think it's also based on the age. Sometimes residue comes maybe in the form of labor. Sometimes it comes in a form of interaction. Sometimes it comes in a physical form, like, for instance, something being used again and again. Sometimes it comes in a conceptual, it comes in the form of a conceptual idea or thought, in a way that we think about that object and what is surrounding it. I want to ask you a question regarding your own role, because we've been colleagues and friends since 2006 when we met in undergrad in Kumasi. Yeah, so we've literally had the same training, just as maybe Bernard Akwe Jackson or Kwesi Oheniaye, to mention a few, and we are all like partners in crime with regards to how we think about the various forms that art can take, and the spaces that they can occupy. And you yourself, you are an artist, you were a painter. I remember when we were in undergrad, we always used to say that Kudjie was the one painter. So now that you've taken the role of, let's say, an artistic, like the role of artistic directorship in an institution, then again, we're coming back to the question regarding the form of art, because maybe like Caricature Seidu, our mentor, who is not making physical paintings now, but using, let's say, pedagogical forms as a way to somehow reorient or to reshift the way that artists think about the forms that they make within this century. What really pushed you within this direction? Of course, I know that your background. You didn't mention your background, that you have an MFA in curating from from painting and sculpture, as we did. So I think it's important for that shift in a because the role that you are occupying now is one which is very big, and one which also holds a lot of responsibility. You've designed quite a lot of workshops at SCCA, working with the children, even within the COVID period. I know that there have been some secret or quiet projects that you've been working on with some of the kids within the community. So I would really like you to also elaborate more within what you think about the notion of form, the shift in form within this time, and why it was important for you to occupy or fill this void.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. I think in school, one of the things that's really interested me was the fact that our lecturers, or some people call them professors, so our lecturers stress on the fact that as an artist, you need to be sensitive to the condition in which you are living in. So when I realized that you were embarked on this project and you invited me to join you along, so something just clicked. I believe Caricature Sedu, our lecturer, he mentioned one. He took us through some few tests or some few theories based on how artists practice and what informed their practice, and how we as artists today can move on beyond that, and so on. So artists criticize, artists began to deal with form, began to criticize institution, and began to reinvent or invent new forms. So realizing the fact that your work began to take a new direction as if as building an institution, if art is a clean, it's a void, as we claim in KNUST, or as we think in KNUST. I think an artist can work with objects as much as can build an institution, as Caricature Sedu's work has to do with the fact that he wants to create artists, not just making objects. So I think it is something very important. So realizing the fact that you want to create a platform for other artists to also showcase their work, publish it, document it. I think it's a very promising thing to do, and it's aligns with the fact that, as I was saying, during one of the classes, Kari took us to Kant, and then one of the things that he stated at the time was the fact that Kant proposed something that's the how do you call it? The category that's one of the imperatives, or the categorical imperatives. So which has to do with the fact that if you want to start something, or if you want to make something, or if you want to do something, before doing it, begin to think that you are doing it for all, something that's universal from the basis. So as you are thinking from the individual that you want to make something, I'm paraphrasing anyway, as you want to do something, or as you want to, before making the work, or as you are thinking about making the work, begin to think about the fact that you are doing it for all. You are doing it for the common. You are doing it for the good of all. So I think it rang a bell, and I began to think about that. So this project is something that I believe falls in that line. So when we started, or when you invited me to join you, I began to look at some of the lapses we have in our system, doing our educational system, and so on. So we have to design workshops to cushion all that. workshops that involves paintings, workshops that involves making objects, as well as workshops that involves writing based on
Yes.
the exhibition we had at the time. So it's tailored towards the exhibition, also tailored towards the individuals who participate in it. Yeah. So can you hear me?
Yeah,
Ibrahim,
I think people are asking questions, so maybe we should start. Yeah, I can hear you. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So after you're done, maybe we can go to the question section and then maybe deal with it also. Adam.
Okay. All right. So yeah, we can. So yeah,
No, I think
that's
you hadn't finished. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's basically some of the things we were doing. Workshops, and then film screening, and so on. So to keep the public of Tamale and anybody who's any visitor from other region to experience art in so many ways. Basically, that's it. Hello. Yeah. So we can now. I think we can now invite questions from the audience.
No, I think there are a few questions there already.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you please speak a bit about the role of collaborators in
your
practice?
The
stories from my friend.
Yeah, I think we can take
Sophie.
that one. Yeah.
I know Sophie very well. She worked with us at in Cape Town with with Francis and I when I did the project with the Novel Foundation. She worked with Francesca in the art fair. Yeah, so let me answer the question. So collaborators are very important. I think that Kudjie, Esinam, Enes Sakite, Kwesi Oheniaye, Black Star Lines, and everyone are collaborators within this project that I've been working on. Of course, in my practice, when I was making objects, I still do. Working with, let's say, the headquarters in Accra, the KIAs, I thought that they were very important to shaping the form that the work would take. And yeah, the not just the form that the work could take, but also like, because as Kudjie mentioned, when you're producing work, sometimes you have to think that you're doing it for all to begin with. So I always thought that the process in making the work itself was very important with regards to all the various hands and residues that would go into it to somehow shaping the final form that it would take. The silo, one of the important things that is happening now is that there are a lot of people who normally live around it, like young men who normally just sit there maybe to smoke or something like this. And they were the reason why even it was it's possible to even work on the silo, because they are the guys who are helping us to drain the water from the building. They are the guys who are helping us to seal some of the holes that are there. They are local carpenters, local electricians whom we are working with to somehow install very basic electrical units within the building to lit up the place in order to access and clean it. And the idea of the common which we are talking about is already embedded within the collaborators, because sometimes there is something which is there which belongs to all of us, but it's somehow hidden. It's somehow hidden at the same time, but through art it's possible to somehow release it and let it realize maybe its full potential. Not to say that once it comes into art, it's fully free. But of course, there are always certain few limitations that might come up that would challenge the artist to constantly rethink about new forms in which we can expand upon the freedoms that exist within within art. So the collaborators actually occupy that position where we understand that what we are creating, the phenomenon, the object or the exhibition or whatever, somehow belongs to all of us. But then we are in a way coming together to use all the different, I think skills and then also experiences, memories and all that in order to realize that, that thing.
Okay, I think there's another question. What's the role of SCCA? How
to play in
how
the
does
implementation.
yeah.
I think Kudjie,
Okay.
you can Selom, you can answer that one.
Thank you. Yeah, I think SCCA is we are interested in, as I stated earlier on, we are interested in opening up the discussions on art, and also not just on art, and also invite collaborations and conversations around so many issues that we are dealing with today. In Tamale, you have to be sensitive not just to what's happening in Tamale, but in Ghana and the whole world as well. So we want to invite people to come and give talk, to come and share what they have or what they know in terms of from different fields of studies, because we're interested in in areas like architecture, archaeology, linguistics, literature, science, and technology, and so on. That's why we have started with our for our tech program. We started workshops, low-key, with students around, and to just give them basic tools about how to use the drone, how they can experience objects, technological objects like drones, how they can think around them, how they can envision the future, how they can also perceive the world. As you are flying the drone, you are looking at the landscape in so many ways from above. So it's about cultivating a new experiencing for kids, and also changing the perception of art around. What artists can do is limitless. So students who come here, or kids who come here, can be inspired, and also can be inspired to push themselves in whatever they are doing, or to aspire to do more than whatever they know. So when you come to SCCA, you experience paintings, you experience technology, you experience literature, you experience so many other things. We just started, but that's the goal, basically.
I think it's also important to note that maybe with regards to SCCA's engagement with the kids in Janatram, where Red Clay is, like Latif, who is one of the kids learning the drone. Like yesterday, when we were at SCCA, I think they were looking at this video where you wanted them to do the translation, where Latif is teaching other kids the drone technology. Yeah, I remember like a couple of 2 weeks ago when I was at the Red Clay, we're doing some construction work, and the guys from the Dagbani film industry came. They were coming to shoot a scene of their film there. I didn't ask them specifically what it was. I was somehow making a joke, like maybe they were doing some post-apocalypse scene with the airplanes and all that. But they brought in their own drone to fly in the air, in the space, and it's an older drone. And the drone that we are teaching Latif with is a much more recent drone that has certain sensors and all that. So with the classes that he's been having with regards to looking at the issue of time in relation to the technology and all that, and also having to understand the parts and how they move and all that, he was telling the drone guy that, oh, he could do something. And the drone guy looked at him like, what do you know? Like you were in the middle of a village somewhere. But it was actually quite interesting that suddenly this technology that seems so far away has become a gift. And at the age of 12, he understands it to a point that he can teach it in the local language in Dagbani, in a village, to other kids. And I think it's very significant in terms of what it represents within our age, particularly when we're thinking about what forms that art can take and the freedoms that come with it. I think that that's where that's in all of the things that we're doing, that's where actually the revolutionary forms lie within. the fact that the impossible can be done, and it can somehow construct new meanings within our life forms.
Okay, someone is asking if the public if Red Clay is open to the public whilst construction is undergoing.
Yes, people come to Red Clay all the time to shoot videos and whatever, but I think during the exhibition, the next exhibition, which maybe Selom, you introduce it, but during the next exhibition, which will be happening, part of the constructions are still going to be going on. But for us, and for me in particular, it's always been important looking at the idea of producing something versus people experiencing it. So when you're making the artwork, let's say in a bridge, as the other images that I showed, and people experiencing it, also covering the bridge, it's all in one thing. So it's important for those two things to coexist.
Okay.
Selom, do you want to introduce the retrospective of Dota we are doing next? We haven't spoken about it.
Okay. Today we've sent out the press release to so many platforms on social media and also our media partners. So we basically, the next exhibition is going to be showcasing a Ghanaian artist called Ajimausai, aka Dota. He's simply called Dota. So the exhibition is titled Ekutia. The exhibition is called Ekutia.
Blindfolding the Sun.
Yeah, sorry. Ekutia, Blindfolding the Sun and the Poetics of Peace.
Yes.
Basically, Ekutia is basically like a jab, sort of. A jab would be more, it's too strong. It's more like an innuendo, a suggestion, sort of, an innuendo, sort of, a subtle suggestion, sort of. So, yeah, it's a bit poetic. He's a poet, he's a writer, he's a dramatist, and also he was an alumnus from the Department of Painting and Sculpture, TNUST. So it will be good to have him in Red Clay since we are all from the department. So a conversation begins, cross-generational conversation begins. So we want to show, as part of the programming for SCCA, we want to show artists from the previous generations so that people can experience the work that they've done, and also to see where we've come from and where we are moving to. So it's a bit historical, but also to give a general sense of the history of Ghanaian art in a way. So the exhibition will be, it will be open to the public from the 4th of September to 7th January next year. Too bad. I think the connection is Ibrahim is it's offline again, so I don't know. Yeah. So basically that's what we are that's what the next exhibition is about. So it will be cited in SCCA and then at the Red Clay. SCCA is multi-sited. So the main gallery of SCCA is in a part of Tamale called Destinate or Kwambiao, and then Red Clay is situated in a village nearby. The salo that we are also working on is also situated in a different part of town. So SCCA is a bit scattered or spread around the city of Tamale. So it's when you come to Tamale, to also allow you to move around to experience the city and also the culture of the place. Yeah.
Hi, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you both so much. And I'm sorry if the connection wasn't great, but I think we got most of it. I think it only cut out right at the end. So thank you both for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you too for hosting us.
Well, thank you very much. Yes,
yeah, I just want to take this opportunity as well to thank everyone involved in helping to make these series of talks possible, and to all our artists and speakers, and to the Art Fund for their funding support. We are going to be looking at how to make the Arts and Place Consortium more sustainable. So please sign up to our mailing list, which you can find on our website, which is artsandplace.org. And we'll be sending out a short survey to gather feedback soon. So thank you again to Ibrahim and to Selom, and to all our viewers. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.